Hey everyone, welcome to the Grace Hopper Conference Scholarship Q&A session that I'm hosting today. So I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes before I start. Hey everyone, welcome to the Grace Hopper. Awesome. Okay, so I see a couple of people are here right now. There's two different ways that you can ask me questions. The first is through the live chat on the YouTube video. And the second is if you follow this link here, you can actually ask me questions and they'll show up on this presenter tool system that is set up with Google's presentation slides. And I can actually post the questions straight onto the presentation so other people can see them as well. If you can, try and use the slides option, but if you're just in the live chat and have questions you want answered quickly, that's also okay. So I'm going to wait another minute before I start the presentation. In the meantime, why don't you guys introduce yourself? I see Justine and Jenna. Oh, you need permissions. Interesting. Oh, wait. Okay, I can fix that. Okay. Do you want to try that again? It should be fine now. Awesome. Thanks, Justine. Awesome. So I'm hoping you guys are getting ready for exams and finals and all the other fun stuff that comes with computer science second year. Okay, sweet. So I actually graduated this past summer and started working after a couple months break where I traveled and went back home to visit family. So it's 2 minutes past 11. I'm going to start, or 2 minutes past 2 for you guys. So I'm going to start the presentation. If you guys have questions, please feel free to ask them as we go along. It makes it more interactive and less just listening to me talk. So hey, I'm Aashni, and I'm currently a software engineer at Microsoft. I'm based out of the Vancouver office in Canada, and it's such an amazing office. I got my bachelor's degree in computer science from University of Toronto, one of the best universities in the world, and I actually graduated last year. I started in 2011 and did PEY, so I had a 5 years at university, which is longer than the average 4, but I feel like the PEY experience was 100% worth it. And if you guys, or when you guys get to that option, I definitely recommend it because it really sets you up well. So other things about me, I am one of the co-founders of UofTHacks, as well as I've been a hacker, mentor, and judge at many other hackathons, and a participant and winner, but that's another story. I was also a former president of the Computer Science Student Union while I was in my third year at university, and I've been a member of the Undergraduate Women in Computing at U of T for years. It's a great group, and there's so many great opportunities with it. I've had internships. I'm constantly working on projects on the side, and I genuinely love goofing around and doing crazy things like kayaking, because that's not very crazy. But I do enjoy doing a mixture of different things, and I like making life interesting and fun. So Grace Hopper or the Grace Hopper Conference is honestly one of the best experiences I've had when I was in my final year. It is such a powerful event because you're in a room with thousands of other women. The year I went, there were 12,000 people there. I believe last year and this year they had 15,000. And you're in a room with so many influential people, so many incredible people that you're important. You know that you're relevant, and you know that together we as women can actually make a huge impact and a huge difference in the technology industry. And if you're reading stories that are coming out right now, with like Susan Fowler at Uber, and then there's just hundreds of other stories like that. Um, Knowing that you're in a room with so many other women who are able to make a difference is just a huge boost, and it gives you that momentum to want to keep on going. So there are so many different advantages of going to Grace Hopper, and in the context of you being students at U of T, especially since you guys are in your second year, networking and job searching are two of the biggest ones that I found were very helpful. So networking works in two ways. It works first as meeting other women in the tech industry, who you become friends with, and keep in touch. Like, I still keep in touch with some of the women that I met when I was at Grace Hopper 2 years ago, and it's a nice way to just just know other people in the industry who aren't necessarily from your university, and just see what they're up to. And a lot of the times, if you're visiting their city, you've always got a friend in that city as well. The other side of networking is you're networking with recruiters and people in the industry from companies that you might want to work in the future. And so that could be people working at the big companies like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Twitter, or even smaller companies that you are interested in working in. And when you start networking with people in those companies, they can put a face to your name. So when you send in your application, it really, really helps boost who you are, because once your face is associated with a resume, or once someone in the company, they can sort of push your name through the system a little faster, and it gives you that extra boost of your resume isn't just lost in the pile of resumes. It's actually viewed by a recruiter and passed through the channels. So job searching is so important, both for internships and full-time jobs. So the job search through networking is one aspect, and then Grace Hopper has the biggest job. What are they called? Brain fart. It's where all the different companies set up booths, and you can go and pretty much put your resume down, find out about other jobs and stuff that they have in the area, and find out about jobs that they have quite literally all over the world. And I say all over the world because I talked to recruiters from Booking.com, and they actually sent me. They actually interviewed me, and they're based in Amsterdam. So I actually got to fly out to Amsterdam for that interview process. And then you have workshops, which are another really great way to, obviously meet people. But then the workshops are incredible. Like, you've got a lot of workshops that are geared towards students specifically. Some of these, coming to your question, Jenna, some of these are great for people who are introverted, because it's a way to sort of help you gain confidence, help you talk to other people. A lot of them are, resume based, or how to ace your job interviews. And then a lot of other workshops are just general sort of how to be better people in tech, how to be a better performer at tech, or in your tech job. And the workshops are really great. A lot of them happen simultaneously, which means you might be interested in 5 and they're all happening at the same time, which is unfortunate. But a lot of them have notes and stuff that you can get access to later on, which is really helpful. So I'm just going to present a question that Jenna asked, which is, what are some tips for networking in GHC for those people who are introverts? And that's a really great question. So I find that if you go to Grace Hopper with a friend, it becomes very easy for you as an introverted person to sort of go with your friend, and the two of you go and meet people together. And that becomes a really good way for you to just meet other people without having to go too far out of your comfort zone. Granted, this means you have to go with someone you know. Another way to sort of navigate through Grace Hopper without going with someone is to go to a lot of the parties. And I say parties because it's more like a company-sponsored event at a restaurant or something afterwards. You can go for those, or you can go for some of the meetups that they have during the event, and just talk to whoever it is that's next to you. I know that seems very scary, but at some point you need to step out of that comfort zone area, and just look at the person next to you and have sort of a list of 5 or 10 questions that are your go-to questions whenever you meet someone. For me, it's usually a combination of, where are you from? And at Grace Hopper, this is a great question because you have 12,000 or 15,000 people from all over the world. So where are you from? I like asking about languages because I feel like if someone isn't from an English-speaking country, but they speak English, they usually know at least 2 languages, if not more. Even if they are from an English-speaking country, a lot of people do know more than 1 language, and it's always interesting to see if you know the same set of languages. You can ask about projects that they work on if you want to keep it less personal. You can also ask about, because you are staying here for the conference and stuff, you can ask about where, if they got through, if they're staying in one of the hotels that are close by, or if they're staying at an Airbnb. And if you just have these like 5 or 10 questions running around in your head, it'll make it less scary and less intimidating to go and talk to a person. Since you've already prepped yourself for these questions, and then your conversation should usually just flow through that. If you don't want to have questions per se, you can also just talk about whatever's happening around you. So if you're at the keynote opening ceremony and you're sitting next to someone, you can just you can talk about how excited you are for the week, assuming you are excited. If you know who the speakers are, you can talk about whether or not you know the speaker, or whether or not the person next to you knows the speaker. Or have heard them speak before, because a lot of these speakers do a really good job so that's probably some of the tips that I have for introverted people. I'm trying to think if I know any other, or if I have any other advice. It's like, if you're introverted, it can be sort of intimidating to just go and reach out to other people, and also I think for introverts it's more like you get very tired talking to people. So make sure you get enough rest in between, whether it's during the conference or it's in the evenings, because you can very easily find yourself doing, 18-hour days while you're there, and you're on your feet almost the whole time. So it can very quickly become very tiring for you. And if you're an introverted person, I think when you're already tired, you don't really want to interact with other people. So just make sure you pace yourself while you're going through it. Okay. So Grace Hopper sounds amazing, but it's extremely expensive. You guys are all from Toronto, and flying from Toronto to Houston, paying for your hotel or your Airbnb while you're there, it can easily come up to over $1,000, not including the cost of the ticket. So you want to try and make this as cheap as possible. And this is where I introduce scholarships. Scholarships are a great way for you to get a lot of the money that you would have to pay for this event covered. One of the big ones is the ABI scholarship, where I believe they pay for your flights and your hotel, and they actually give you spending money while you're at the conference as well, which is really amazing. I believe the deadline for that was March 8th, which means we just passed it. But for next year, you can definitely keep an eye out and start working on your application, start meeting people who can help give you tips on how to apply and how to have a strong application for ABI. ABI's scholarship is more, I find it's more academic based. So it's more geared towards people who are in research and doing researchy or academic kind of topics. So if you're trying to gear towards that kind of a scholarship, maybe try to start working on research projects over the summer, or doing research projects with professors for one of your courses. And that's a great way to sort of pad your application, per se. The way that I got to Grace Hopper on the year I went is using a company-sponsored scholarship. So I actually got a scholarship through Google, which was amazing and incredible. Some of my friends got scholarships through Facebook and Twitter as well. And these scholarships are usually really great as well. It's very similar to the ABI scholarship, where the company will pay for your ticket, pay for your flight and your hotel. And in my case, Google gave me some spending money that I could use during the week as well. And it's not necessarily a lot, but considering, you are in a foreign country, or for us, we were in a foreign country, it's just very nice to know that they care enough to actually go this extra mile for you. I also got really lucky with my hotel, because my hotel was connected to the conference center. And I say that because I had a couple of friends whose hotels were like 30 minutes away, and it meant you had to wake up that extra half hour earlier to get to the conference, or at the end of the night you had to debate whether or not you wanted to stay out at the social networking events, or if you wanted to go home early. So those are the company-sponsored scholarships, school-sponsored scholarships, or conference stipends. So I believe that Zoe is, and I'm assuming you all know who Zoe is working on trying to get U of T to help sponsor at least part of the scholarship or part of the payment process. I know that U of T has done this in the past because they've paid for one of my friends before, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then employee conference stipends. So if you're working at a company, like I'm currently working at Microsoft, or if you're working there as an intern, whether it's on your PEY year or something else, or you worked as an intern over the summer, you can sometimes ask them to cover the cost of the conference for you, or part of the cost for you. And a lot of companies, as one of the perks and benefits, have the fees that they can. Let me rephrase that. A lot of people have the stipend as part of your benefits, so that they will spend, whether it's $1,000 towards your conference, your tickets, your hotel flights, and everything, or whatever it is. And it's extremely great because some companies, if you intern for them over the summer, they'll actually offer to take you in October for the conference, even though you're not working there anymore. And that's how one of my friends got her scholarship the year that I went. Your other option is to apply as a volunteer. And I think I've got a slide on it in a little bit, so I won't talk about it too much. But applying as a volunteer is another really great way because you get, and you're going back to Jenna's question about introverts, when you apply as a volunteer, you have to work with other volunteers during your volunteer shifts, and it's a nice way to meet other people and to just start that conversation. And I find I think I was extremely intimidated when I went to Grace Hopper because I'm just one person in a crowd of 12,000 people. So it's just very nice and a lot more reassuring to know that there is someone else there that that you can kind of just buddy up with for part of the day. And then you can also separate and go and discover different parts of the conference yourself. So if you're applying as a volunteer, your buddies become your volunteering friends, and it works out really nicely. So I'll go a bit more in depth in the different types of scholarships that you have. If you guys have any questions, please do feel free to ask them. So the ABI scholarship, I won't focus too much on this since we just passed the deadline, but make sure you answer all the different application questions. They usually have a ton of questions, and it's easy to forget to answer one or try to remember to go back to it later. They do have very personal essay questions. I believe last year it was why you want to attend the Grace Hopper conference and how you plan to share your experience at Grace Hopper with others if you're selected as a scholar. And what you want to do is make sure you break down that question into the different parts of the question that they're asking. So don't just answer why you want to attend. Make sure you answer all different parts of the question. They also wanted your CV or your resume, and then if you were applying as a student, which you would be, you needed a letter of recommendation provided by a faculty member on your behalf, and your transcript. So for this letter of recommendation, and I'll talk more about it in a little bit, this is going back to you have a year to start working on research projects or close with a faculty member. And when you get close to faculty members, they're more likely to write better letters of recommendation for you since they actually know who you are rather than, the random person who sits in the 8th row in their lecture. So that's a really good way to go about it. And then your unofficial transcript is one of the requirements as well. Just speaking of transcripts, I believe the ABI scholarship is the only one that requires the transcript as part of your application process. And this goes back to the ABI scholarship is more academic, whereas the rest of the scholarships are more about passion and influence and what you can bring to the table. So, if your grades aren't necessarily the best, don't freak out and don't think that you have no chance of getting a scholarship, because my grades were not the best and I still managed to get a scholarship. Not the ABI one, but a different one. So yeah, I'll dive into tips for your personal essay. Make friends with people who are around you and review each other's applications. You might be thinking, yeah, it's extremely competitive just to try and get one of these scholarships, and you don't want to let your friends know, or you don't want to make their scholarships or their applications better because you don't want them to get it and you don't get it. And yes, that might be true, but that's not the way that we should be thinking about these things. You want to better your odds by helping each other out. And when you help each other out, like your odds together are both increasing to go. I really recommend asking people who aren't in the tech field to go through and review your essay as well. And I say that because when I submitted my essay, I asked friends in the tech industry to look through them. I actually asked some of the other people who got scholarships to go through mine as well. But I also asked a friend of mine who I knew from university but wasn't in the tech industry. I believe he was studying biology. I also asked my sister, who's not in the tech industry. She's doing urbanization and geography and business. And they are great because they're not looking at it from the tech perspective. They don't understand the tech lingo, but they can look at it from the grammatical perspective. They can look at it from does this story and does what you're saying make sense? And they can also look at it from, yes, you might not be talking about something I understand, but I can still see your passion for that topic. Or they can point out flaws in your essay where maybe you're writing something and it's not quite connected. So definitely create a network of people that you can ask to review your essays, and make sure you return that favor if they ever ask you for it as well. On the reviewing aspect, I really recommend using online editing tools. I use Google Docs because I've always used them and they're really great. Because with Google Docs, you can actually set it up where people can make recommendations and you can go and accept or decline them. You can actually have conversations and comments on them. And it's just a really great tool for you to use for, editing essays and then just general assignments and stuff as well. One thing to watch out for is contradictory advice. So if you're asking 2 or 3 or 10 different people for advice on your essay, I find that there's always a couple of people who have very different opinions. And if you at the end of the day, it's your essay, it's portraying who you are. So make sure you go with the advice that most closely aligns with what you want at the end of the day. And I say that because whenever I ask my dad for advice, he's always got really amazing advice. But sometimes he's more of a business-minded person, and I'm more of a technology-minded person. And sometimes the things that he'll advise me on are not necessarily things that work well in the current tech industry. And so I just, as much as I love him, I need to know when that contradictory advice is something I shouldn't take. So we've got a question here from Cheryl. How do you maintain the connections that you make during GHC after the conference ends? So this is a really great question. And I feel like I could actually do an entire presentation on this. I actually have talked about this a little bit in one of my other videos. And you want to try and keep in touch when you first meet people, you want to try and get some form of contact information with them. So whether that's, Facebook or an email address or Twitter, or even just their business card so you can follow up with them later. That's a really great way to go about it. Business cards are great because you don't have to get their contact information on your phone straight away, especially since your phone's likely going to die during the event. But then business cards also become annoying because you might not remember who that person was or the conversations that you had with them. So my biggest tip with business cards is, or you'll lose them. So my biggest tips for business cards is take a photo of it, or take a photo of the business card next to the face of whoever it is you're talking to. And if you can, try and write a comment on the business card. That way you can remember who the person is that you were talking to and the kind of topics that you were talking about. Taking the picture means you're less likely to lose the business card later. And then just in general, keeping in touch with people after the conference. I find Facebook is one of the best ways for me, but that works more for friendships that I make at the conference and not necessarily for, let's say, recruiters that I meet at the conference. So Facebook, it's great to set up, group chats with some of the people that you meet. If you get on really well with 1 or 2 people, obviously keep that relationship, maintain that relationship. If you're trying to keep in touch with recruiters that you meet at the event or people who work at companies you're interested in, just immediately when you meet them or at the end of your conversation, ask for their email address, say, I'd love to keep in touch, and then send them an email straight away if your phone still has some battery in it. So, literally take your phone out, ask them to put their email address in the to field, and then just quickly write a subject line. And then in the message box, just say, hey, we met at Grace Hopper. I had a great time chatting about this. Just wanted to say a quick hello. And this way you have enough information to remember who they are, and you can always go back into your sent items to follow up and send them another email. Also remember, after the conference, it's 3 days and it's extremely tiring, stressful. People have to travel back home, especially if you're students, you've got assignments and stuff to catch up on. So people might not respond straight away, but give them a couple of days to respond. The other end of that is try and send out messages to people, especially if you have business cards or emails but haven't emailed them yet. Try and email them within the first week, because after that it's sort of like that gap of time makes it harder for them to remember who you are. So I hope that answered your question. I've got another question here, but the button is hidden. Okay. So Yamini is asking, how is networking at the conference different from conversations with mentors and recruiters at hackathon type events? I feel like networking at events like this aren't, in a lot of ways, it's still networking. I think the big difference is maybe the type of conversations that you're having. And I think it's more because at hackathons, you're usually geared more towards hackathon type of questions. So like, oh, I'm working on this project, or, my API calls keep failing at this point. Whereas at the conference, you're talking about the different types of topics that are going on at the conference. And, but I feel like the way you interact with people is exactly the same. And, if you're a little bit more extroverted, it's a lot easier for you to go out and just be like, hey, my name's Aashni and I'm from Toronto. Where are you from? Did you enjoy the talk we just had about, the different standing poses or the power poses that women should have? Or I think the Sage Fanch is helping host a VR talk this year. So did you, are you planning to attend that VR talk? But the way that you interact with someone is going to be the same. I think you asked specifically about mentors and recruiters at the hackathon, or mentors and recruiters in general. So you don't quite necessarily have mentors at a conference, just because they don't necessarily have to mentor you in something specific unless you're at a workshop. But with recruiters, they're usually standing behind the job fair booths. And, you would go up and talk to them the same way you would talk to them at a hackathon, because their job is essentially the same thing. Hope I answered your question there. Okay. So, so back to your personal essay. Make sure you talk about the topic that they've asked you to talk about. So I mentioned earlier, you want to break down your essay into the different segments. So why do you want to attend Grace Hopper? How do you plan to share your experiences? And when I was in school, and I'm talking about, like 9th grade, 10th grade kind of school, we had this 5-paragraph essay format where you've got your introduction paragraph and your conclusion paragraph as your first and last paragraphs. And then you've got the 3 paragraphs in the middle, which is where the meat of your essay should be. Now, yes, it's called a 5-paragraph format, but it doesn't have to be 5 paragraphs. It's more sort of, you have your introduction paragraph, which is your big sort of, draw the reader in paragraph. And in there, you've got your thesis statement, which for something like this, you can mention, Grace Hopper would be great to attend because it will help me accomplish, X, Y, and Z. And it will allow me to share these experiences with other people later in these ways. And that can be part of your introduction. And then your next paragraphs would be talking about those topics in more detail. So remember that this is your platform and your way to advertise who you are. And this is the only way that they're going to get information from you, where they can hear it from your perspective and your voice. So make sure you make it count. Something that I did, and something that some of the other friends that I have did, is, and we did this like separately, I found out she did this well after the conference had ended, is including links into my applications. A lot of the times you're uploading your personal essay as a PDF document, and rather than just copy pasting text into whatever the application process is. So I would Google Docs are great. I would go and turn mentions of me being computer science student union president. I would highlight that and turn it into a link that goes to our computer science student union page. Or, the same thing for UofTHacks, the same thing for projects that I've worked on. And I would try to throw in things that made me sound more impressive, Like, oh, I won this hackathon, or I started this hackathon. And then, if it's something like I won a hackathon, I can directly link to any news article that was related to the hackathon and stuff like that. And it just gives them the opportunity to have and find more information. And that's really important because I believe the Google scholarship essay was restricted to 500 words. And you want to make the most out of those 500 words. You don't want to spend, 20 words explaining what a hackathon is, or 20 words explaining what the Computer Science Student Union at the University of Toronto is, because that's already 7 words. And but by including these hyperlinks, a lot of the times people who are reading your essays are doing it on a computer, and they can quite literally just click on the link and get to find out more information without having to Google it, which is usually it takes a lot longer, and they're less likely to do it. So I think one of the biggest things that I found was extremely effective when I was applying for my different scholarships was figuring out what being a woman in tech meant to me in the context of going for the Grace Hopper conference. And I'm in school, I want to go and pursue a degree or a career in technology. And I say this because I first applied for the ABI scholarship, and then once I got rejected from that, I applied for some of the industry scholarships, which was, I believe, Twitter, Facebook, and Google. And when I first applied for the ABI scholarship, I was extremely busy with schoolwork and stuff, so I didn't put that much thought into why going for the Grace Hopper conference meant so much to me. But when I was applying for the other ones, especially the Google one, writing the essay, I started thinking about this more. And I'm going to read out the last paragraph of my Google application essay. And it's that I'm a woman of color in the technology industry. None of these words define what I can do. I'm a firm believer of leading by example. I believe that every person should understand their rights and know their potential. Every person should understand that gender is not a factor or an indicator. This is my message. Now I want to promote it. And that's just the way that I wanted to end my Google application, because if you read the rest of my essay, I think I have a link for it at the end. I talked a lot about what it means for me to be a person in the tech industry and the kind of ways that I want to share the knowledge that I have or the knowledge that I gain at the conference with people when I go back to university. And this for me was my way of saying, I don't color shouldn't be an indicator of who you are. And the fact that I'm a woman does not mean that I am more or less capable than anyone else. That's not the reason that I'm more or less capable. And that for me was, I think, a nice way for me to end my essay. So for you guys, I think it's a good way for you to sort of think about what being a woman in tech actually means to you, what going to this conference means to you, and sort of maybe jot these down before you start working on your essay so that you have an idea of what it is you're trying to write or achieve. And it also just makes, if you have a concise thought or a concise paragraph, essentially, it's a much more powerful statement in your essay. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some tips for your CV and resume, because almost all of these applications require one. You want to make it look nice. And I say that because a lot of recruiters go and look through, thousands of applications. Sorry, so this is general CV resume tips and I'm talking in terms of recruiters looking at it, but also falling under the idea of people selecting who should go for the scholarships. So recruiters look at hundreds and thousands of scholarships on resumes daily. And after a while, they all sort of look the same, especially if you're just using, simple Arial 12 size font, black text, and not really formatting it in any way. So if you can make it look nice without too much effort, it just sort of gives you that extra edge over other people. And it doesn't require a lot of work. There's loads of templates online. There's actually websites where you can use a JSON string and it'll convert it into a nice looking resume for you. If you're creative like I am, I actually designed my resume myself in Photoshop and then added a lot of text and stuff to it. And I personally enjoyed doing stuff like that, so that's for me, but if that's not for you, it's fine. Also, the focus isn't to make your resume look amazing and incredible. You want to make your information on your resume easier to understand. So Jenna just posted Credle.io is extremely great for resumes, and I 100% agree. I've sent a lot of people to that website, and it's really great for making very nice looking resumes. I also really recommend getting feedback from other people. So there's the Hackathon Hackers website and resume group. I don't know how I misspelled that twice. But yes, there's Hackathon Hackers website and resume, and you can pretty much post a copy of your resume and people will essentially roast you on it, but the feedback you get is almost extremely useful. And I find a lot of people who go and actually take that feedback in a positive way go and make a much nicer resume at the end of the day. You should also ask friends and family and other people in the tech field. This little group of people you're asking for help with your personal essay can also be people you can ask for help with your resume. Again, what I mentioned earlier with the whole contradictory information applies here. And then people who aren't necessarily in the tech industry might not understand all the buzzwords, so that's another thing to keep an eye out for. Make sure you've got your name, your school, University of Toronto, and don't use an abbreviation like U of T, because U of T could mean University of Texas or Tennessee since you are in America. And then state your year, and with that you want to put an expected graduation date since you haven't graduated yet. I remember that was one piece of advice I got while I was at the conference. And then obviously list out any work experience that you have and any projects that you have as well. And these projects can be, if you're in first year university and don't really have any other projects, they can be school projects. But make sure you try and get other projects that aren't school specifically related. Because after a while, when you're in your second, third, fourth year, recruiters want to look at what else you can do, not just what you've done at school. And then it is extremely important to get your code up onto GitHub. It doesn't have to be the nicest looking code, but just having code on there or like different projects on there is extremely helpful. Now, I'm not saying go and create 20 repositories with shitty code, because that's also not a good idea. But, if you are working at hackathons or if you are working on a side project to make a movie recommendation website or something, get that code onto GitHub. And it just shows that you're working on things in your free time and you're working on honing skills that make you more marketable, for this conference and then also for jobs in the future. I actually did a hour and a half, 2 hour long video on job prep tips. And there's a link here. I can also send you guys a link to it later, which goes a lot more in depth into the CV resume, as well as, how to prep for the job interview process and stuff like that. And so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that here, but I definitely recommend going for that video, especially because at Grace Hopper, you get the opportunity to, you're dropping off resumes to a bunch of companies. They have interview booths on site. So a lot of people are actually having interviews during the conference. I had a couple. And then, or you have interviews scheduled beforehand and then do them on site once you're there. So that's just something to think about. So yeah, tips for your recommendation letter. These are, I find the letter of recommendation by faculty member was required for the ABI scholarship. I don't think it was required for the industry scholarships that I applied for, but I applied 2 years ago, so things might have changed. Make sure you ask the faculty member in advance. Don't give them 3 days to write you a letter, because they're very likely going to say no since they don't have time to prepare for it. Make sure you also include a brief description on what exactly the Grace Hopper Conference is, because they might not necessarily know, right? And this is true for any time you want to write a letter of recommendation. It's always great to ask them in person. If you can't meet them in person, send them an email and say, hey, I'm applying for the Grace Hoppers for a scholarship to attend the Grace Hopper Conference. The Grace Hopper Conference is a celebration of women in technology, and where thousands of women get to meet, and we have whatever reasons it is that you have for wanting to attend. If you can't think of too many, Zoe actually put a great description of what the Grace Hopper Conference is in the Facebook description for this event. So you can always go and take a look at that. I think it's really important to make sure the faculty member is someone you know personally. So someone that's taught you, I think, is one of the requirements a lot. But then not just taught you, but someone who actually knows your name in a class. So, whether you're one of the people who sit in the first, second, or third row and asks questions often, or you've gone to their office hours, that's always a good way to get, to get them to know who you are. Or if you worked on them with a research project, or for me personally, someone like Diane, I've never actually taken a class with her, but I have worked on projects with her for CSSU and UofTHacks and other things. So that's how she and I got to know each other. I believe ABI's requirements was that they had to have taught, at least one of the people recommending you had to have taught you. The other people could have known you from other ways. There's also a maximum number of recommendation letters you can get, so keep an eye out on that. Try and get as many as you can. Obviously, the more the better. But, don't ask 10 people if you can only have 4 recommendation letters, because then you're wasting those 6 other people's time. And then always follow up with a thank you email to whoever it is that sent you a faculty member. And then once you know the status of your application, like whether you got accepted or rejected, they may, it's nice to just sort of let them know that, thank you so much for your help. I got accepted to this scholarship program and I'm extremely excited for the event. If you'd like to know about it afterwards, I'd love to, to have some coffee with you and tell you about it. Or, I got rejected, but hopefully I'll get accepted next year, or whatever it is. And it's just sort of, it's that completion loop where they get to find out. And that way, if you ever have to ask them for a letter of recommendation again in the future, they had this sort of positive experience with you the first time, they're more likely to want to do it again. Also, with letters of recommendation, obviously give them as much time as you can to write the letter. And if they haven't quite done it in, let's say you've given them 2 weeks to do it. If after a week they haven't submitted it yet, just send them a follow-up email or, go knock on their door and just, send sort of a polite reminder. Because do remember that these people are very busy, they're teaching classes and they've got a lot on their minds as it is. So one of the big questions I get, and especially from first and second year students, is what if I don't have enough technical experience? And this goes back to what I was saying about if you don't have, if all your school assignments or all your coding experience has been from projects you've done in class, then that's great, but it's maybe not enough technical experience. I say don't worry too much. A lot of these applications, especially the industry ones, are looking more for the passion that you're bringing to the tech industry, with the understanding that, hey, you're still in school and you're going to gain the technical experience that you have. Your application isn't due today. Your applications are going to be due over the next 2 months, and this gives you plenty of time to go and prepare and to get extra technical experience and to go and create those GitHub repositories with good code. So, pick up something small and simple that you want to learn. One thing I did, not for this specifically, I just wanted to do some more coding practice, was every day for a couple of weeks, I would learn how to write different Chrome plugins. And those plugins weren't necessarily anything fancy. One of them was a lorem ipsum generator. So, you'd click on it and it just give you some lorem ipsum text, but it would pick them up from different APIs. So one of them was like a bacon ipsonator, and another one was like from animals or something. And it was just, getting more experience in using APIs, learning how to make Chrome plugins. And by doing one a day, it was a small enough project that I actually built up, 30 repositories just from that. And then push these little side projects that you're doing, push them to GitHub, because we've talked about, or I mentioned this before, if you have more code on GitHub, it's better, because when people go and look at your GitHub repository and there's no code in there, then they don't know how to tell what your coding skills are or what kind of stuff you like working on. I have always been a huge advocate for hackathons, and I really recommend going for them as often as you can. Hackathons can be intimidating for women for numerous reasons, but either go with a group of women or go with male friends that you have, and I guarantee you it's going to be a really good time. And if you want to have some sort of projects, but if you have time for projects but you don't know what to work on, feel free to send me a message. I've always got different project ideas, things that I'm working on, or just things that I wish somebody would work on for me because I'm too lazy to do it. I'm also working with a startup organization on the side, and we're always sort of recruiting more people to come join us and help us work on the projects that we've got going on. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely shoot me a message and we can chat about it more. Okay, so timeline-wise, March 8th is the ABI scholarship deadline. We passed that. So March 8th next year is when you guys can apply for it. There's company sponsorships. I believe the Microsoft one was announced on March 2nd. and the rest of the sponsorships will be announced sort of sometime during this month and next month. And so these are from, Microsoft, Google, Twitter. There's a lot of different companies who are applying them now. There's a GitHub repository that's one of the best resources to go to, and that's what this link is. It's by, I'm going to mess up her name, Freya, I think her name is. She and a couple of other really great women help update this website often. And if you're part of the Lady Storm Hackathon group on Facebook, I believe people usually post links up to those applications when they're released, and then usually post a reminder up saying, hey, don't forget to apply for this scholarship. So those are great ways to keep track of when they are. Definitely, whenever you find out about a scholarship, put them in your calendar so you can remember to apply for them, and then put the deadline in your calendar, and maybe a week before that put a reminder for you to apply, just in case you haven't gone to it yet, and this way you don't forget to apply or you're not scrambling on the last day to apply. Okay, so company sponsored scholarships. Like I mentioned, loads of companies do these. I believe Taser and Salesforce started doing them last year. I don't know if they did them the year that I went. And then there's also different types of company-sponsored scholarships, because the tech industry isn't just for developers. It's also for designers and PMs and stuff like that. So some companies will do they'll do a separate scholarship for designers. So that's, make sure you're applying for the right one. And if you know anyone who's a designer or one of the other fields who are interested in attending the conference, you can always send them information as well. So other places to look. These are school or employee stipends. So for school stipends, the rules are different and are completely dependent on what your school decides. So for us, it comes down to what U of T decides, what Paul and Diane and, the powers that be at the computer science department decide. Sometimes they'll cover your entire trip. Sometimes they'll just cover the ticket of your trip, which is still extremely helpful. Usually you have to pay for the trip up front, and then to get the reimbursement back from them, you need to show proof that you went for it. This is usually through tickets, like the ticket stub, essentially, or like a copy of your flight ticket and your hotel receipt, and photos, I think, is one of the requirements they had as well, like proof that you were at the event. So make sure you find out what those requirements are in advance. Make sure you know any limits that they have, because maybe they can only give you a stipend of up to $300. And so don't go crazy and spend, thousands thinking that you're getting all that money back. You're definitely not. And then start talking to your professors and, the related department heads as early as possible. So I think Zoe's actually been starting to do this. You can ask her for details about it. About trying to get an official scholarship set up for students at U of T. I know that other schools have been doing it, because I met a group of 30 students from another university on the year that I went, and their school every year sends at least 30 women to this event, which is incredible, which is definitely something that U of T could do. So if you guys go with Zoe and you guys push for something like this, it would be really great. Employee stipends. So I mentioned these earlier. Companies can offer a perk, like one of the perks is attending conferences, and it's definitely something I recommend if you're if you're on PUI or something like that. So I have Google interns listed in here because one of my friends was an intern at Google over this summer, and then once she went back to school, she got an email from Google saying, hey, you're one of the interns that we had. We have this conference coming up, and you were a high performer. Would you be interested in attending it? And that's how she ended up going for the conference. So make sure you make good connections at your internships, and even while you're at the internships, you can always sort of pester in a very good way, in a very polite way, pester the recruiters, pester your manager, find out what the policies and processes are if you do want to attend events like this. So other places to look are clubs. So some are student entrepreneurial clubs. Can offer scholarships or stipends for your trip in a similar way to what the university does. These are probably going to be application based, because they most likely don't have an unlimited supply of money that they can give out. But reach out to different schools, different clubs and stuff to see what they do have available. I think you can maybe even ask UTSU and see if they have a stipend that could work in your favor. But I haven't been in school for a while, so I'm not 100% sure. You can even try emailing the dean directly. So this is both the dean of computer science and then the dean of whichever college you're a part of, and ask them about covering the cost of some of these trips because of all the educational benefits that it's going to give you. Okay, so do you guys have any questions? I believe the next slide is my last one with some useful links. But yeah, questions. These can be about the conference. These can be about the scholarships, the applications, weird things that happen at the conference, great things that happen at the conference. Really, anything goes. So I'll talk about the job fair. I think as a student who attended Grace Hopper, the job fair was probably one of the biggest parts of the conference for me. I wish that I'd spent more time going for the talks because the conference is more about the talks and it should be about the job fair. But because of how big the job fair was and how many people were at the conference, I pretty much spent a day and a half in the job fair alone, just, essentially applying for jobs, dropping off resumes at different companies, trying to build personal relationships with the people that I was talking to. So one thing that I would recommend trying to keep an eye out on is if there are any talks that you'd really like to attend, set timers and alarms on your phone to give you enough time to get from the job fair area back to wherever your conference is, or whichever room the conference is located in. And bear in mind, some of these are like 8 or 10 minute walk apart. And and then some of these conferences some of these talks are in small rooms and get filled up really quickly. So you'll have a wait list after, you'll have a wait list of people waiting to get into the conference or into that talk. So, if it's something that you think is going to be very popular, then try and get to the talks as early as you can, just to make sure you don't lose that chance. Okay, so Justine asked a question. How did you spend your summers during your undergrad? Great question. So I spent all my summers in some sort of an internship. And I would also try and get back home for at least a couple of weeks so I could go and see my family and stuff. So if you don't already know this about me, I grew up in Kenya. My family's still there. And so my summer between first and second year, I had an internship in a company called Live Epically in Jakarta. So I went and worked at the company for 2 months of the summer, and then I went back to Kenya because someone in my family was getting married. And, weddings are extremely important, so I had to be back for it. So that was my first summer. My second summer, I worked at a non-tech company in Kenya called Kingsway Tires, and I was working on their sales CRM. I'm not sure if that's the right word for it, but their technology that they're using for the sales at the different branches in their company. My third summer, so this is between third and fourth year, I interned at Amazon. And then instead of fourth year, I did PEY. So from September to the following September, so it included that next summer block. I did my PEY internship at a company called Oanda, which is a smaller tech company that was based out of Toronto. And so something that I figured out and something that I really liked is that I actually managed to get a job each summer, which was really great because it made it, I started building up my resume from first year, and it made it a lot easier for me to try and apply for jobs later. But I also really liked that I worked at a startup company, a non-tech company, a big tech company, and a small tech company. And I got a feel of the different the environments, the different types of work that I'd be doing at those different companies. And it was a really nice way for me to assess and judge what type of work I'd be doing and what type of environment I'd want to work in down the line. So yes, it's great to get a job at big companies like, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, because, they pay amazingly well. The benefits you get are great. Having a big company on your resume is, you're guaranteed to get at least an interview to other companies for internships and full-time jobs later. But I also do recommend trying to get experience at smaller companies as well, just so you get that mix and that feel of what it feels like to work in different companies. And I say that because in big companies, it's very easy for you to sort of just get lost in the system where you're not really part of, the conversation that makes decisions about what you're building and what you're working on. Whereas in small companies, and one of my favorite things at Awanda is we actually had socials on Fridays where we talk about, it was an open floor and we can talk about anything in the company. And if the CEO was in our office, because we did have loads of offices around the world, if he was in our office, he would lead that conversation. If not, it was the CTO or, one of the higher ups would lead that conversation. And it was an open floor and we could ask any question and make whatever sort of decisions. And, as an intern working at the company, I still felt like I had a voice. And that was very powerful. So if you do get a chance to work at a smaller company and a bigger company, definitely take it. Have you guys had any internships so far, or are you looking for internships, since now is sort of the time that you want to have applied for some? You're welcome, Justine. Yeah, so on one of my earlier slides, I mentioned that I did a how to prep for job interviews video. So that was like a 2-hour, very in-depth conversation that I had sort of with myself and whoever was watching. Talking about, how to sort of boost your resume. And by that, I mean the kind of things you can do to try and make your resume look better. So, going for hackathons, going for different projects like that. And then I talked about how to, just networking tips, attending conferences and tech events and hackathons, talking to people there, talking to recruiters there. Like tips like I mentioned with the business cards and stuff like that. I talked about that for quite a bit. Then I talked about resumes and cover letters and what's the other one? CV resumes and cover letters. And, tips that I have for them. I think I also put my resume up on it and showed a breakdown of, broke down the different parts of the resume so that you could see how or why I made the decisions that I did. And then I talked about how to get how to essentially get your resume into the hands of someone who's going to actually see it and hopefully push you into the company a little better. And then I gave you some tips on how to actually prepare for the job interview. And I really do recommend watching that video if you get a chance. I see that Jenna's already watched it. Just because it's a great way for you to sort of start thinking about the application process and start thinking about what you need to do to get into that working pipeline. And some of these things you can't really, improve your GitHub project repo overnight. It takes time and it takes work. And these are things that you can start working on today. And it might not be for a summer internship this year, but it would definitely be grateful for next year, kind of a thing. Or it would definitely be useful for next year. Okay. So I don't quite see any more questions coming down the pipeline. If you guys do have any questions after watching this, or if anyone watching this who wasn't part of the live stream has any questions, feel free to shoot me a message or an email. I put my information here on the first page. So this is my email, my Twitter, but it's also Aashni Shah is also my Facebook and a bunch of other things. I will reply, I swear. And then on my last slide here, I have a bunch of different links that are extremely useful. So the ABI scholarship information is maybe not so useful for this time, but for your next year. And then tips for applying to Grace Hopper. I think that was from the ABI's website. And then Freya's compilation of GHC scholarships, which will give you sort of she's really good, or she and a couple of her friends are really good at updating it and making sure that deadlines and stuff are very easy to see on there. Then I've also linked my scholarship for my application for ABI as well as my Google. So those are my 2 essays if you want to read those. And then I've linked the LSH Facebook group, and then the Canadian Celebration for Women in Computing is another conference that's like the Grace Hopper one, but based, it's a much smaller event, and it's based out of Canada. So it's a little cheaper in a lot of ways for us to attend. It's not on the same big grand scale, but you still get a lot of the same benefits by, networking, meeting other people in the industry, and the talks are still fantastic. So yeah, definitely make use of those links. I'll put the link to this slide deck on the video, which should be getting published any minute now. And yeah, feel free to send me any questions you have down the line. Thanks so much, guys, for attending, and I wish you all the best of luck. If you want me to take a look at your essays and stuff, feel free to shoot me a message, and if I've got some free time, I'm happy to. Okay. Thanks. Bye.